ESV Antichrist Bible Translation Exposed. Welcome back to another one. PTE Godcast. Push the envelope. Big G's, not the little ones.
Genesis.
Here to feed the little ones. What's going on, y'all? Hope everybody is well. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We got a hot one today. ESV Bible Translation Exposed. This is the Bible translation, the English Standard Version, and it's been held as the hegemonic translation of the Christian world, the apex, the superior translation for the doctrine. And me being fair, the ESV is a good translation, but there's a part of hermeneutics, proper hermeneutics, is comparative translation and also comparing the ancient manuscripts. That's how we really find understanding of, the intent of what was written by the prophets. So we have Wes Huff, and we're going to get into Dr. James White and them extolling the ESV, but they don't want to highlight or expose one of the major flaws within this Bible translation, where it's actually antichrist. It's anti-Messiah. It's anti the Christ. One of the major prophecies that give us the timeline in which the Messiah should appear on earth, they take that away and give it to Onias 3 and Antiochus Epiphanes in Daniel chapter 9. We're going to explain that in a second. So let's play a couple videos real quick, short clips.
I've said it before and I will say it again. I care less what translation of the Bible you read as much as I care that you're reading it. Now, the caveat to that is that not all Bible translations are created equally.
Not all Bible translations are created equally. Just like all men aren't created equally either. I don't know why this country says that. Anyway, that's enough. But all Bible translations are not created equally. There is stratification within the translations. This is what he feels. This is what Wes Huff feels. Now he's going to tell you which ones reign superior.
There are good translations.
What was his good translation?
Is that not all Bible translations are created equally. There are good translations.
So right on his good translation, you'll see on the screen he has the ESV. Okay?
There are bad translations, and there are, of course, heretical Bible translations. And the King James Version of the Bible is neither the most accurate nor the best translation in our day and age.
I can say this, though. The King James does not have Antichrist verses and Antichrist interpretation because, by definition, every translation is interpretation. There are presuppositions and biases going into these translations. So let's get Dr. James White on what he feels and how he feels about the ESV as well. This is from Dr. James White reveals which Bible translation is most reliable.
And so, as we found earlier in earlier manuscripts, now our critical editions, which take into consideration not only the Greek manuscripts, but all these other translations, have a much broader textual basis. And so there are differences between that and the Textus Receptus. So if anyone has a King James, and remember, if you had a King James today, you don't have a 1611 King James. You have a 1769 Blaney revision of the King James. And even then, you've either got the Oxford or Cambridge, and they're not identical to one another. That's based on the TR. The New King James is also based on the TR. Some people think it's a translation of the majority text. It's not.
The TR, for those who don't know, is the Textus Receptus, said to come from the Byzantine text.
It's a translation of the Textus Receptus. So they are going to have, for example, 1 John 5:7, the Comma Johanneum, a text that was not a part of the Greek manuscripts of the New Testament until at least the 1400s. There's going to be those places that it's going to vary in its text from ESV, NASB, NIV, Holman Christian Study, which are all based upon the modern eclectic text, which have this much broader textual basis.
All right,
So there you have it, folks. He mentions the ESV as the more modern, accurate translation, pulling from a broader sense of translations and also ancient manuscripts. Now, to be scholars, Dr. James White and his PhD, and Wes Huff, a soon-to-be PhD, why won't they highlight the most erroneous blooper of the ESV, the most Antichrist verse in the ESV? Why won't they highlight this? Why does it take little old me to highlight this? Maybe there's a motive behind it. We don't know. Now let's see what is going on. Where is the Antichrist verse in the ESV? What you're looking at, everybody, is Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. Look at the rendering of the ESV. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Wait a second. What? And we're going to explain. These scholars who came together to translate the ESV, they believe that Daniel was written at a later date, maybe 300 years after the man Daniel existed. So they believe all things are fulfilled in the Greek time period, and that it did not extend to the Roman period or beyond. A lot of scholars and theologians have these same understanding. But this is clearly Antichrist because it does not fit timeline and prophecy. And this is one of the most go-to clutch, prominent prophecies that tell us when our Lord, not only that there is a Messiah to come, but when the Messiah would come. Antichrist, Bible translation exposed for their evil. So they want this to be, well, we're going to talk about it in a second. Now let's look at the other translations, because Dr. James White said that these all should have some relativity. The NIV says, know and understand this, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. This is 69 weeks. Now, for those of you asking, why do we even care about the weeks? Because these weeks are not literal days. This is each day for a year. The Bible uses numbers like this. So really, this is dealing with 70 weeks being 490 years. Now, every other translation has 69 weeks. They go 7 plus 62. Look at the NLT. It says 7 sets of 7 plus 62 sets of 7. That's 69. The ESV has until the restoring to the Messiah to only be 7 weeks. The Berean Standard Bible says, from the issuance of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The KJV says that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 69 weeks. Every 90% of translations, except for the ones that Christian apologists and theologians hold so dearly and superior, have the restoring to the Messiah to only be 7 weeks. That would be 49 years. That would be 49 years. That don't add up. And we're gonna go further into this, but they want this to be like certain other groups. Cyrus the Great. Oh, he was chosen. He was anointed. They want the Messiah to be Onias the 3, which that doesn't add up with the timeline. We'll get in a second. He died at 171 BC. Doesn't add up to the timeline. And then they want Antiochus Epiphanes to be the Messiah that came to stop sacrifice and destroy the city. But that does not line up with the weeks or the timeline. This only lines up with the Messiah who the world calls Jesus Christ. Real name in ancient Paleo Hebrew, Yahushai. You understand that? So let's just take a look at this. One more time. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of the anointed one, the prince shall be 7 weeks. They want to take this away from Christ and give this to Onias the 3. Now watch this. It has to start where the commandment is given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now this commandment is given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem after Jerusalem is destroyed the first time by the Babylonians. So after the Babylonians, Cyrus the Great liberated the Israelites, but still had them in subjugation. And then you have the first time the decree is given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Notice it doesn't say the temple in Daniel 9:25. It doesn't say the temple. It says to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. That's when the 70 weeks start. Now look at the Bible timeline. We'll take this circa. It says 444 BC, Artaxerxes sends Nehemiah to Jerusalem. Builders of the walls named. Builders overcome ridicule. 444 BC, completion of the wall. You can read this in Nehemiah chapter 2. In Nehemiah chapter 2, we start at verse 4. It says, Then the king said unto me, For what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said unto the king, If it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send me unto Judah, and the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. Nehemiah 2 happens 444 BC, roughly, or circa. So that's when the 70 weeks, which are not literal, has to start. In 444 BC, 49 years after that, no Messiah comes on the scene. The ESV is completely butchering Bible prophecy because of their presuppositions and personal interpretations as they're translating this. You understand? Making them Antichrist on the most major prophecy of when our Messiah would come. You understand? So, when we keep going, we take a look at the context of this. So it has to be 444. And then if we go the whole 490 years, it only puts us to the Messiah, who the world calls Christ, who was on the scene and lived and died around the end of this 483 years that the Bible says. So remember, it says 69 weeks from the declaration to restore Jerusalem to the Messiah is going to be 7 plus 62 weeks, which is 69 weeks. That's 483 years. So if we count 483 years from when we first get this proclamation from Artaxerxes, it brings you to about 37 AD. Right at the time, most historians say, give or take a couple years, because we're dealing with history here in circa, right at the time that the Messiah dies. according to the Bible and extra biblical sources. Why is this so amazing? Because the very next verse, it tells us that this Messiah who was to come would die after 69 weeks. And it says, and after 62 weeks, I'm reading the KJV, not the faulty ESV. I do read the ESV, and I'm going to continue to. But this is why you got to do comparative translations. And after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off. So remember, prior it said 7 plus 62. This is saying 62, but it's still the 69. So after 483 years, the Messiah would die. Amazing Bible timeline and prophecy about our Messiah. But they are antichrist when it comes to the most major prophecy of the Messiah. Now look at what they have on the rest of the verse that does not make sense. Back in Daniel 9:27, at the end, it says, then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. Now they know that this is not a literal 62 weeks. This would have to be 434 years. The Israelites were not building Jerusalem for 434 years. You see how faulty this is? Why? Because the composers of the ESV have shown themselves to be antichrist, at the least, on the most important prophecy. We need this. We need Daniel 9 to be the Messiah, because it gives us a timeline on when he will come. For non-messianics, for 92% of the Jewish community who did not believe that the Messiah came already, and to validate the divinity of the book, how Daniel was able to prophesy this 500 years before it happened, the coming of our Messiah, the coming of our Lord. So yes, this is a problem with the ESV. And we want to know if Dr. James White and Wes Huff will highlight this and reconcile this, or explain the intentions, motive, and agenda behind it. It only lines up, either Daniel's a false prophet, or it only lines up to the time the Lord came 2,000 years ago. Oh, I enjoyed that. Let's end this, everybody, by saying peace, blessings, and shalom. On to the next one.